Secretary?
Yes. David McCarthy. Bill Newcomb.
Here.
Bob La Liberty.
Here.
Eric Jordan.
Here.
Lauren Cahoon. Here. Brandon Woolley.
Here.
Paul White.
Here. All right.
All
Can everybody
present.
rise, remove your hats for the pledge of allegiance? Pledge allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Minutes of the last meeting, has everybody had a chance to review those? I hear a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Second, motion's been made and seconded, all in favor? Anybody opposed? No. Thank you. So at this time, we open our, for those of you who've never been to this committee meeting before, we have public comment at the beginning of the meeting and then public comment at the end of the meeting. Because I know myself, sitting in a meeting, I always think of more questions. So in order to give everybody ample opportunity to speak and hear what you have to say, we do it up front and at the back. So at this time, public comments.
So, a quick question though, Archie, do we have everybody signed in?
Yes.
No? Okay, great.
You have a question? You do.
I have no comment.
All right.
Good evening. Definition of committee. A group of people appointed for a specific function, typically consisting of members of a larger group. Ordinance committee. A group of people working on ordinance of the town. To date, we have a list of items to put moratoriums on, an amendment to land use ordinance in the village district. I realize I'm not going to make any friends here tonight, but it has to be said. This committee is lopsided. 3 members are appellants in the quarry appeals. The chair is against it also. That's 4 out of 7. A committee is a board that should be neutral in the process. I'm not sure how to rectify this issue. Ordinances should last for years. This needs to be equal in the process. I'm not feeling that. I don't speak for the planning board. If you think the December 4th meeting was easy, you're wrong. The days, weeks, and hours spent thinking on that was challenging, to say the least. I honestly want what's best for this town. I have no agenda. It's just what's best for Sebago. I will also be bringing this up to the selectmen.
Thank you. Any other comments tonight before we get going? I see that we have a representative from Gorham Sand and Gravel tonight, and Andersons, who already have an existing quarry. I actually went up to see the Andersons last week and asked them to make sure they came down tonight so they could talk to us about any concerns that they have with, new ordinances. And so if you guys want to tell us what's on your mind for concerns, I think that would.
We would just like to see the rural be left alone.
Mm-hmm.
My name's Ryan Anderson, 4th generation of George Anderson and Sons Excavation. We've just, I don't remember exact date, Brandon, but when were we approved by the town to operate?
March 2012.
So we got a solid 10 years under our belt. Does anyone know of any official or non-official complaints? Ever?
I haven't heard them.
We've never received any at the town office.
We've never even received any in person. We are living proof that the current operating standards and current ordinances are working. Whether or not they work for the village zone, I guess that's why this committee is here. But we would like to see, the rural be left alone, I guess.
We've talked to our attorney about that several times. And when you have a life safety ordinance, which this is, you can't go by zone or different sections of town with zoning on it. It's a land use ordinance. And how he explains to us is that the people that live on Peabody Pond Road have equal right to be protected the same level as people in East Sebago. And you can't have one ordinance for East Sebago and another ordinance for Long Hill, and then another one for Max Corn, and then another one for Peabody Pond. It's the whole town has to come under the same ordinance. So that's why we're trying to make this ordinance so that it doesn't put anybody out of business, that it keeps everybody working, but protects the town equally. And that's the tough part, right?
We've operated for 10 years, we were operating many years before this. We've never had a single complaint.
I don't
So
know what
to
he's
say that you
saying
can't
now.
separate the zones, that's not. You can separate the
What's the
zones.
sense of the zoning?
You have 3 different zones, you can separate zones. Yes, rural is much different than village. We are proof that it works in rural. What else can we do? We haven't been operating for 1 year, 2 years. We've actually been operating since far before 10 years. But we were approved by the town. You know, we have vested rights in that pit anyway, but that's besides the point. We were approved by this town, we played by the rules, we go out of our way to make sure that we play by the rules. And it shows. We have no complaints, not a single. What else can we do? So now we have to pay the penalty?
What's the penalty you're gonna be paying? I mean, what do you understand?
We've already put a 15,000 yard penalty on us.
Have you ever done 15,000 yards?
It varies. And, well, I mean, our company's.
Are we going next year?
Have
I
you
mean,
ever done
that's-
15,000 yards?
That's
But what about next year?
I don't know.
Exactly.
I don't know.
Yes, Paul.
Now, I don't know what I was gonna say. Just give me a second. What the problem is, Barry, that pit was designed with the rules that were back 10 years ago. So if you change the rules,
We're not gonna be able to keep.
we're not gonna be
going.
able to do anything, and no, that's the problem.
You can't put an extra escape route out the back. The day one, when you start designing a pit, you're committed to a certain direction.
I don't think there's nothing in our ordinance that addresses that.
Well, right, well, we're here to make sure that this isn't the direction that we're going in as well.
Right.
This just starts with the 15,000 yards. You know, all we're saying, why are you trying to fix something that isn't broke? This clearly works in rural zones.
Exactly.
We're trying to make an ordinance that fits the whole town, not one particular zone.
Then why do we have 3 different zones?
What's it, make the whole town one zone then?
There's
I mean-
zones for a reason, that's all we're saying. We understand everyone's point of view. We're not trying to throw a wrench in this. But we're just saying we are living proof that the current operating standards work in rural zones. That's all I can say.
And we're very, very concerned if the ordinance is changed, that
It's gonna affect us.
it's gonna affect us. And
Well, the ordinance, as a matter of fact, on January 25th this year, the town meeting, the special town meeting, they did vote in a gravel extraction ordinance limiting to 15,000 yards.
yeah, we know that.
And what we're trying to do is improve that. This committee had nothing to do with that ordinance that was presented. It was presented by the Board of Selectmen and the attorneys, brought to the town meeting, and the town voted it. That's our ordinance right now. And what we're trying to do with this committee is improve upon that to add some things that will help the town as far as safety, and give you more flexibility with other things, like stockpiling, things like that. So it actually favors you in some ways.
We were discussing earlier increasing the limits, and you mentioned it might go up to say 25, I think was the figure. We're discussing that, whether the limit, there should be limits or whether they should be higher. And I know you're also concerned with some of the record keeping that's suggested, and I mentioned that, and try to keep that from becoming overburdensome. And also is concerned about your, access to insurance and getting people to do your blasting. So we're aware of that. So we're trying to make sure whatever we come up with is gonna address those concerns. Allow you to,
Let me just say, the big issue with the zoning, and you brought that up. Gorham Sand and Gravel bought Sheep Mountain to put a quarry in it. No one would deny that. If we change the zoning to say no quarries in the village district, then that takes away all of their rights to their property to do what they want to do on it. And it could open the town up for a lawsuit. Maybe, maybe not. So rather than go down that rabbit hole, we're doing a life safety ordinance that we feel is a reasonable ordinance to protect the whole town equally. And you can't do an ordinance by zone. You can do zoning by zone, but not an ordinance. And that's the difference. So any zoning, any land use ordinances that are in town right now affect the whole town. Not just the village district, not the rural residential, not just the rural. Every district, the same.
So it's the same size building lot as it is downtown, as it is up here?
That's your zoning.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take away the right to
If you're gonna
use
have a
your
blanket
property.
over the whole town, then, yeah.
Right, it just doesn't change your right to use your property for the intended use.
Yeah, it does, you can only put one house on it instead of three, like, it does change things.
It's-
There's a lot of different, yeah.
Anyway. Anyone want to comment on that?
well, there's two separate issues. One is that there's an ordinance we're suggesting, putting together that will regulate gravel pits and mining. The other is a separate issue of zoning. Now, it could be possible that the town voted to exclude it from the village districts, but it also has to be taken in the total context of what's going on with the application from Gorham Sand and Gravel. And it might not be advisable to simply eliminate it in one district. That might not do it. We should have ordinances that might allow it at some scale. At least that was the discussion we had earlier, so. It might be better not to approach it by trying to eliminate it in this individual district, rather to approach the concerns with the ordinance. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to, at least one of my goals here is to make sure you guys can continue an operation and try to minimize the effects upon it.
One of the things that we are talking about is up to so many yards, keeping it commercial, and if you go over so many yards, making it industrial. And the industrial standards are higher standards than commercial. So, again, depending on what you come up with for quantities on those two definitions will depend on at what level you operate. And right now, you're on a commercial operation level. So there's things in this ordinance that can come out for commercial, but not industrial. So we're looking down that path as well, and Mr. Murphy, our attorney, is talking to the MMA to see what suggestions they would have along that line. So we're not done this ordinance yet. It's still a working document, and we're taking your input and Andrew's, and if he's got something to say, we're taking it all in consideration, so that when we finally get a final draft, it goes to a town public hearing, and it can still be changed after that. Then it goes to a town meeting to be voted on by the town.
And we've made the ordinance less onerous, not more so than what the town
Had previously voted in.
trying to make it less onerous on you guys and something you can operate within.
What's a life safety ordinance?
Apparently, all the ordinances are considered life safety.
Oh.
Yeah. Us too.
So, I mean, to get your votes, that's why it's a townwide thing. It's a political stance. You're trying to scare everyone into thinking that there's gonna be a pit going in behind everybody's house. So to get your agenda approved, you're looking for votes. So the only way you get your votes to get your agenda approved is to make it a town-wide ordinance
Absolutely.
versus going for just the village. You can do different zoning, different ordinances for different there's different zones. I know you can. Change the
I
language.
know he's talking to MMA to see to what extent you can do that. I mean,
All
we
I'm
just,
saying
we
is that
just
it's a
talked
political
about that.
stance. It's nothing more than looking for votes to get the agenda approved here. You can make it a village zoning issue and leave rural out of this.
We don't have an agenda.
We don't
We
No,
have
no,
an
no, no,
agenda
no,
that
I'm
the
not, but
town-
if, to get, right, you know what, when people go to vote, they read the first 3 words or whatever, and it says, do you want a quarry in town? They don't even read everything else below it. Instantly, no. Why? Because everyone,
Just because.
it's scary. Everyone in town now is gonna have a pit behind their house. Get real.
I haven't heard that anywhere. I don't know where you're coming up with
Of course not. I'm not pointing fingers. I'm not saying, the reason this isn't just a certain zoning issue is because they're looking for votes to get this ordinance approved.
No, the attorney has told us when you craft
This
an
attorney-
ordinance, it has to be town-wide.
Okay.
But we just talked to him about that in
I have
executive
attorneys
session,
too, so.
and he's checking with MMA to see if that's a remote possibility to do what you just said.
And he is checking on it. He just left here 10 minutes, 20
Yeah.
minutes ago. That was one of the.
So we're going
This
down
is
that
one of the
same
reasons.
path that you're thinking, but whether or not we can do it, we need our legal to tell us if we can or not.
Respectfully, gentlemen, we do have openings on the ordinance committee. It's a time commitment, but we
So
would
it's
certainly
conflict of
welcome
interest.
someone else.
I mean, that would be accused of conflict of interest.
We're not down here, the reason why we haven't been down here is we do not, we care about the town of Sebago, we work for the town of Sebago, and we do, we really care about the town of Sebago. We don't want people upset, but I'm sure tonight
We're getting
people are
back into a
upset.
corner.
And we don't want that, and that's why we haven't been around, that's why we just did,
We are-
hopefully it would take care of itself.
We are a legitimate, small, local business that, like my brother just said, we're getting backed into a corner. We are trying to run our business, but that is hard for us to do when you guys are already changing ordinances. I mean, come on, we went through all the hoops 10 years ago, it was over 10 years ago, and now we can't follow our plan to continue growing our business? That's what you're saying. You're putting a limit so we can't continue growing our business.
You already have a limit on it. We haven't done it. The town did. You have a 15,000
Because
yard.
of
The town did
everything-
it because everyone thinks there's a pig going behind their house.
Exactly. You guys changed it because it's a
No,
whole mess.
No,
no, we didn't change it, all right? The
So
Board
how
of-
did it get
the
on the
Board of
ballot?
Selectmen-
How did it get on the ballot?
You wanna listen? The Board of Selectmen came up with this ordinance, and they brought it forth in the town meeting, and the town approved it for 15,000 yards, all right? At the same time, if I'm not mistaken, they came up, or through petition, they came up with this committee. And so we are now working with current ordinances, which is a 15,000 yards, trying to see if that's adequate. If it's not adequate, if we need to change it, which I think you've heard from everybody here, that we think we are changing it. We're changing limits and all that. So it's still a work in progress. We're not gonna not do anything, because we're not here to not do anything. We're here to
If we don't do
try and make
anything, you've
it
got
better
the
for the people of
15,000
Sebago.
yards
In other words,
that you can do.
it stays there, so hopefully our recommendation will be that it increases somewhat. 25 was the figure mentioned. Other than that, I would wanna see the standards not be too onerous on you, and try to keep them, so you keep you in operation, what you're doing. And some of the ideas about that, not necessarily of my making, but that's what we're dealing with.
I would like to add, so I try to keep really good notes about when we receive paperwork. And on the 21st of December, we were provided with the gravel ordinance that was voted in. This was provided to us, it was drafted by the town. And if you can look through my notes, and right here at the 15,000, I'm saying, we need to adjust that. We need to work on permits, we need to, look at bonds, we need to specify definitions. we are not against business in this town. And I know that you've been trying to stay away, trying to let us manage everything, but we honestly, as a committee, can't work on your behalf if we don't hear from you in our meetings. And you may have spoken to certain members of the committee, but if you're not here to address all of us, we can't represent you properly.
No, we understand that. We didn't come here to, raise our voice. You gotta understand where we're
No, I
coming from.
understand.
It's been over 10 years. We've been an approved operating quarry in the town of Sebago. Small business, we're a legit small business. We're missing 2 guys right now. We're a 5-man band, okay? And so, is it right for you guys to put limits on a small business? That is, we're a little frustrated. I mean, we're a legitimate operating quarry that has been operating for over 10 years. And you're telling us what we can and cannot do now.
What we
With
are
no
saying-
complaints.
What we've been trying to say is that there's an ordinance in effect right now that limits you to 15,000 yards
Oh,
away.
we're aware of that.
And we're working
We're
on that
working on
to better.
increasing that for
As a
you.
matter of fact, the ordinance is in effect right now. I own Stevens Road, and I wanna get gravel out of the bank down there to fix the road. With this ordinance is in effect right now, I can't do that until I come up and see Brandon get a permit to take gravel out of the bank down there to fix my road. This takes care of that. This allows the homeowner to be able to do that to their own property, fix their own roads, without being commercial, industrial, and having to get a permit. So we've taken that ordinance that we thought was really not great, and we're trying to improve it to make it more friendly for the whole town. And that's what the people said they wanted at that special town meeting when there was some complaints about it. So we're trying to fix that, and I'm really glad you guys came and expressed your opinion. The only thing that I would tell you is that towns make ordinances all the time. And there's proven case studies that just because you've had a quarry for 10 years and no complaints and you've taken out 15,000 yards, ordinances change, and that doesn't mean you can continue to take 15,000 yards up. If you look at the solar panels in
Doesn't make it
Lovell,
right either, exactly.
the solar panels in Lovell, the guy wanted to put in.
You're
180
not
acres.
even, we're not even on the same page. We have thousands of dollars invested in, we're not making Italian sandwiches down the road. We got thousands of dollars invested into that quarry. And you're saying we have a limit on how much money we can try to make? I mean, come on, this is
I
ridiculous.
understand what
You
you're
got to
saying.
keep us in mind when you start putting things on the ballot for these people that really don't know what these,
They don't know what they're
they
voting on.
don't know what they're voting on. So,
We didn't put it on the ballot. We're trying to fix it, and the town, I don't know, it was 220-something people to 4 or 5 that voted for or against it. So now we have it in effect. Now we've been tasked with the task of trying to fix it.
yeah,
So that's what we're really working hard to do.
yeah, and I just want you guys to keep us in mind while you're doing this stuff.
All right, anybody else, public comment? Andrew, you had your hand up.
I did, but
Oh, Ian, yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to let you guys know that the Board of Selectmen did put this on the ballot. We were advised by the attorney that we had to have something in there, or we would be going, we're trying to protect the town because of a potential lawsuit, and that's the only reason we did that, okay? And with the idea that they would tweak and fine tune this, and you guys were, foremost in our mind, okay?
Anybody else got any public comment? Yes.
Just a quick comment. I haven't heard much, and of course I haven't made all the meetings. I've tried to keep up with the minutes that are published. But I really haven't heard much justification for the 15,000 yards. I mean, not just the 15,000, but if we're concerned about truck traffic, or I can't see really, potentially it could impact it, except that there's so many ways you can program the trucks that you could really end up hauling, most of the stuff out in 2 weeks if you had a 15,000 yard limit, so how does that limit, you know, and
Well, if
that
somebody
would be a
chose to
nightmare.
take 15,000 yards out in the month of January, or say December, 15,000 yards and 15,000 yards in January, then there's not much you can do. They
They're
wouldn't be able to take any
separate
more the rest of the
boundaries.
year, but
Well,
they could come right in and move in
you know,
and take it all out.
if it was scheduled, you know, in a short period, like we're talking about now, I would think it'd be a nightmare as far as the increase in truck traffic and the noise and everything else that goes with it. And the idea that, 15,000 yards, you spread it over a year, you know, it's only a few truckloads per day or several. So I haven't heard much justifying really putting something in the ordinance like that.
Again, that wasn't our number.
I know,
So-
but now you're talking about it and I'm saying, I still haven't heard much discussion, and I admit, I've attended a few meetings and I've read some of the minutes that are published, but I don't see a real, and maybe you haven't felt that's your job yet to justify. At one point would be, is that really, can that really be justified? Is it really gonna solve the issues that you've been talking about? And if not, worrying how much that number should be is sort of, wasting your time.
We did hear, Jim, through the appeals, that likely when Warm Sand and Gravel does work, it works with a 15,000 yard limit, that they'll do most of their hauling in a relatively short period of time. We certainly heard that loud and clear because they couldn't do it effectively or in good business sense otherwise. So there's some of this about doing that so that people can do it in a relatively short period of time and be done with it. But you do have traffic for a period of time.
Yeah, you have to live with a tremendous load of trucks for a couple of weeks.
You do.
I really can't see how that, is a good.
I think to try to say, you know, you could take out 2,000 yards a month would be a management nightmare. I mean, how do you manage that? And then no one can make any money doing that. We do think that limiting the quantity somewhat per year will reduce the number of times you need to blast. I think, Paul, didn't you tell me you blast twice a year?
Yeah.
Yeah. The proposal for Gorham Sand and Gravel on their initial permit, I think, was like 20 times a year, maybe, something like that, I don't know the exact number. So, that amount allows you to stay in business with the amount you've been doing. Whether it needs to go up a little bit, that's open for debate, but to try to keep track on a monthly basis is near impossible, I would think. Yes, sir. Yeah.
From my understanding, the 15,000 yards came from the Andersons, no offense. I heard, I don't honestly remember where it came from, but
No.
somebody
No, we
contacted you guys, said you do 15,000 yards a year. I'm just, this
That-
is what I've heard. I'm not pointing fingers, I'm not saying anything bad.
Right, where does that
I'm
come
just,
from?
I don't,
Where'd it come from?
Where'd it come from?
I don't
You
remember.
can't say that and not do that.
I don't remember. I
I mean,
swear.
get real.
I'm just telling you that, I asked where the number came from too, just so you know.
Okay.
I asked where the number came from, I've done my research on this. I've asked this board about the 15,000 yard number.
That's probably the
On
most
multiple
we've done in a
occasions.
year, that's probably where it,
Okay, well, let me finish my thought. I've asked about the 15,000 yard thing multiple occasions. I've done my research. I haven't found a town that has a limitation on aggregate removal. I've been told some different towns, so on and so forth. I've contacted those towns, and it's not true. So yeah, I'm not for the 15,000 yards by any means. It's like a new pizza store moving in down at the empty store down there, Christus, what was it, Station 4. Jordan's only sells 25 pizzas, so they can only sell 25 pizzas. It's not fair. It's not good business. It's I agree with you completely on the 15,000 yards. I don't believe there should be a limitation on
Well,
it.
to say that that number, to say that that came from us is
Okay,
misleading.
that's just
No,
great.
no, I'm saying it's misleading for you to say that it came from us. Have people ask what we average on an off year? How people take that information and run with it has nothing to do with us.
Okay.
But for you to sit in this room and say that we set that limit,
No, I didn't say you
That's
set
a-
that limit. I said that's.
that limit came from you guys, that's exactly what you said. I would appreciate it if you didn't, that's ridiculous.
All right, my bad.
All right, so, any other public comment before we start? All right, we'll close the public comment. All right, so let's continue with this next revision, to revision 10. I think a lot of what we want to do on it's going to depend on what the attorney comes back and tells us
Right,
after he works with MMA.
right.
He's working on the industrial standard versus commercial. He's working on the, what'd you call it, the overburden?
Overburden,
So,
excavation not being part of their.
so on the last proposal, the overburden was part of the 15,000 yards, and if we change it, what we talked to him about is not having that overburden part of the 15,000 yards, as long as it was used to produce the berm, which would actually make it less noisy and whatever for the town. Hold dust in, noise in, the whole works, so. And what kind of brought that up is the fact that if your ledge is 20 feet deep, and you got 20 feet of gravel on top, and you got a 15,000 limit, you bulldoze that gravel off to get to the ledge, you can only do 15,000 a year. Could take you 10 years to get to the ledge. So by pushing it up into your berm and getting rid of it, it's not part of your 15,000, so you can put it all in the berm if you want. So again, I think that protects everybody, because the way that ordinance is written right now, that's part of the 15,000 yards. If you remove 10 feet of gravel in a 100 by 100, that all counts. And under our proposal, it won't. So, again, we're trying to make this ordinance as user-friendly as possible. Any comments?
No, I think that's good, and I think that's,
So we're recommending an increase to 25? Is that what we're saying?
Well, we talked about leaving the commercial at 15 and going to 25 with industrial.
All right.
And the industrial standards are higher standards than commercial. Thoughts on that, guys?
well, again, we're waiting for a legal opinion whether we can do that or not.
Right,
So, but that's the direction we're heading right now.
right.
Let's see what he says.
And once he says that, there's some other standards in this that we may be able to separate out for commercial and industrial that we don't need to have in here,
Right,
for commercial.
correct.
All right.
And he
And
was gonna.
we're still working to our guidance, which is our ordinances and our comprehensive plan. And our comprehensive plan certainly talks about small commercial, small industrial,
Right.
keeping the rural character, those kinds of things. So we're trying to keep the limits at a reasonable level.
All right. On the new business, review and discuss the ordinance and zoning change proposed by Bob. I think we pretty much decided that we weren't going to attack the zoning at this point.
Right.
Any other comments on that, Brandon, Paul? Anybody?
That's what we should do based on the advice we received.
Right, okay.
And I think Tim was gonna look at that a little bit too at the same time. I hope in his conversations with MMA.
Right.
Because there are zoning changes that are made in other places, of course, and all those kinds of things. In the use tables, yeah.
So Lori had presented a copy of another town's blasting ordinance. Has everybody had a chance to really read through that? digest it? What are your thoughts on it?
I didn't know if you guys had any specifics relative to it, but, basically, it manages peak velocity, it covers, certain bond levels, requirements that if there's any complaints after blasting, there would not be an additional blasting license provided. So it kind of protects the town, in that aspect, helps with dust mitigation, vibration, all of those things that have been areas of contention as well in this situation.
You? I want to ask the Andersons a question. When you blast, how many yards is it about that you blast out? Let's say 5,000, 10,000?
7.
7 or 8? And I know Brandon said there was a house about 470 feet away, had no problems with it. But do you do
We do
a
light
smaller
bulbs.
blast because of that, and
Yes.
more directional because of that?
Yes, we do.
So you can control the blast, right?
It's all handled by professionals.
Right.
Hopefully, we don't lose those professionals. Because, yeah,
I think there's a lot of towns around that have gravel and extraction ordinances now that didn't have them 10 years ago. And,
you gotta,
I mean, they all have blasting.
yeah, so, 7,000 versus 14,000 yard blasts, I mean, you gotta take that because you gotta make it worthwhile for these guys to do this.
Right.
You can't,
Mhm.
and if there's any risk involved, they're gonna say, hey, we're not really interested, because it's not worth it to them.
Right.
That's why we're showing a concern.
Oh, yeah.
It's huge.
I know.
Did Maine Blasting recommend a 7,000 yard size blast? Is that what they recommend, or is?
I mean, it's all based on finances and it costs a lot of money to do shots, so.
Yeah, understood.
I mean, there's a lot of factors that come into play, but yes, obviously with a smaller shot, you're gonna have a less vibration involved.
And how long does it take them to drill an 8,000 blast?
It varies, but they're in and out of there in a week.
About a
I
week?
mean, it obviously depends on what rig they get in there, they have different rigs, so.
The next question I have for you is, we've talked about putting a bond, requiring a bond for every blast. How hard is it gonna be for you guys to get a $500,000 bond to cover any damages done to a budding property?
It just,
I mean,
as soon as that's brought up, then there's questions. And one thing leads to another, and, when you're dealing with insurance companies, if you're a risk, they're gonna double your rate, or they're just gonna say, see you later.
right.
I mean,
Or to say that if you get one complaint after a shot, you can not get another permit, let's get real, if you have one person.
I don't think that's in there, but.
No, she had just, not saying it is, she had just mentioned that that's how maybe another town does it. I mean, that's just opening a can of worms. I mean, a guy on the other side of town's gonna say he felt it, or, I mean, it's just, if you give someone an opportunity, even whether or not they have a right to complain or not, they're gonna complain, just because you looked at them odd the other day. You know what, you're just opening a can of worms.
One thing we had discussed, and I don't know where it went, but we had discussed, before every blast, there's an inspection or an option for an inspection, right? We're talking about putting the responsibility of that on the quarry owner, simply because I don't think Main Drilling and Blasting has paid out for one piece of damage, at least all we could find in any newspapers, any articles. So the first stop would be the quarry owner, put that responsibility there, which hopefully holds Main Drilling and Blasting to tighter standards. And I don't know what happened to that.
It's in here, it's in there.
Where?
guys know what your maximum peak velocity is? Sean and, or DSG?
I don't know.
No, okay. I'm just curious.
It's on section 206, Dave, right at the bottom. I can,
Okay,
I
you're right.
can
It
read it.
doesn't say- No, I get it, I see it.
Okay.
But maybe you ought to read it to them, so.
This says, prior to any blasting, the licensee shall provide the town an indemnity bond of not less than $500,000 in coverage covering any and all claims of damages to neighboring properties. This bond shall be written such a way that it be called upon by any property owner within 2,700 feet of the blast site that is damaged, including town property and structures. Such bond shall be in addition to any insurance coverage licensee and subcontracting blasting companies may hold. Now, whether or not that stays in here at that language, and that's left to be seen, but that's how it's in this draft. But it's a working document.
Didn't we just drop that to 250 feet, blasting within?
We lowered the distance to a residence to 250 feet, but this says if you're within 2,700 feet and it's
Right.
damaged,
Which is the
then we
last.
call the bond to take
It
care
says
of
like
it.
in 200, I think, with, Mr. Mercer.
Well, that's
So
just-
again, the question is to the contractors, how hard is it to get a $500,000 bond? I mean, if you call your insurance company and say, we're gonna blast next week, I need a bond for $500,000, what,
I wish it was that easy, Barry, it's not.
well, that's what we need to know, because we don't
Well, we
know.
have told you.
Big hang up
We
on
know.
We're not, I mean, maybe, I don't know if Warm Standard probably deals with it more than we would, we don't, it's not something we typically do. It's not, we're not.
Have you gotten bond, you must have gotten bonds before.
My attorney advised me not to impede what you guys are doing. I'm just here to listen.
That's fair. I can respect that.
Again, the genesis of this was that people had problems and they got nothing was ever rectified. There were lawsuits and an individual suing a company as large as a blasting company. They ran out of money and they ended up, just made sense to repair it themselves, whether it be a well, foundation, or radon, or whatever.
No, it's okay, go ahead and comment on it. That's what we're here
I mean, a
for.
lot of these risks are taken into consideration before the pit is approved. You know, it's, the town has to approve the pit, and all the landowners and the butters are made aware of what is happening, and they have a right to come to every meeting before it's approved. So now, I mean, double, triple, quadruple insurance for everyone in town, I mean, I don't, I'm just saying.
No, I hear what you're saying, but again, ordinances are living, you know? We don't just stay in
So still
1970.
saying here today and gone tomorrow, that's the times now. It's awful, but it's the times.
Well, our mission here is not to hurt any business, but to protect the town. And we're trying to draft this so that it doesn't hurt anybody.
Oh, we appreciate that, we appreciate all you guys' time, honestly, I mean, it's,
And we do have an opening on this board if you know anybody that wants to get on it. We have one vacancy, we put it on the town website this past week. I don't know if we've got any applications yet, Ann, I haven't been told whether we do or don't. So, but is there, you know, somebody who wants to get on the committee?
So, to Lori's point, I don't know how many times I've said, well, where are they? Where are they? The Anderson said this, the Anderson said that. So, be part of it.
What do you mean the Anderson say,
We hear
Did you hear?
hearsay, so there's hearsay.
hearsay, exactly.
Well, we heard it from, you had a conversation with Barry, correct?
Yep.
You did, Paul?
What's that?
Was it you who talked to Barry?
Yeah,
Paul and his son.
Okay.
well,
And
these guys weren't there at the time.
all right, but I mean, that's what we hear, well, that's great, but
That's why I
I
asked you
mean,
to
I
come down
need to
so we
hear
can
that
hear
in order to
what your
be,
concerns
you know, make a decision, right?
It's pretty straightforward. I mean, it's not rocket science. We are, I mean,
We have vested rights to keep continuing doing what we're doing in our quarry that got approved 10 years ago.
Okay.
And we just wanted you guys to keep us in mind. This is gonna hurt a small local business. Anything that you guys put against us, it's gonna hurt us. So, we just wanna keep going.
I'll try to keep going.
And we appreciate you coming in. We invite you to the next meeting too. It's a working document and process. You have nothing to lose by coming and everything to gain, right? If we know what we're working with and what our contractors need and don't need, so.
We're not up to make people mad. We don't, and that's why, because it's frustrating to me. I'm old school. I don't like this stuff, you know? I don't, now we're right in the middle of it, and wow, this is serious.
It is. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
I mean, we got people coming in taking pictures, we got people, I mean, you wouldn't believe the stuff that's going on, and, I mean, they have the right, you know, but, I mean, we're just a small outfit, we're just trying to stay going and make a living.
No, and I understand that, and I respect that, and honestly, I don't think that we can overstate that hearing the opinion of the people in the town is that's what we're working with.
Yeah.
And so if we don't hear it, if we don't know, we can't do anything about it. We're not trying to put anybody out of business. We're not trying to be not business friendly. What we're trying to do is just manage a mess that was kind of thrown into our lap and be fair. We want to be fair. We don't want to prevent any businesses. We don't want Sebago to look like we're not welcoming. That's not it. But the majority of what we have heard has been counterintuitive to what you guys are telling us tonight. And if you have a conversation, regardless of who you have that with on the committee, we can't all understand based on, receiving, and this is no disrespect to Barry, but when we get tidbits of the information or we hear, a generalized conversation, we don't know what all was covered. We can't work for the people, which is why we're here. It's why we're writing the ordinances. It's for the townspeople. You're part of the town.
Right. Sorry.
Well, that's why I wanted you to come tonight, because it's one thing for me to go up and talk to you and then come back and tell these guys what you said. It's better to hear what you have to say.
But, so the town has all our core information. They have all our ordinances that we got passed, 10 years ago. So anything you change, that it's gonna affect us. So we're just asking, can we at least continue operating to our plan 10 years ago? That's all, that's why we're here.
And I think when we get done with the definitions and different size quarries being commercial and bigger ones being industrial, is gonna solve a lot of that problem. And Dave hit on that earlier when we was talking to you.
We're waiting to hear back from the attorney in regards to what we are legally allowed to do with the verbiage of what we're putting into the ordinance. We are limited by what we can do legally, and to your point, Ryan, we've discussed zoning issues and been advised that that's probably not the appropriate way to go. We've talked about grandfathering. We've been advised that's probably not the appropriate way to go. But we are getting legal counsel on those things. Those are things that we brought up. There are things that we discussed. There are things that we need to know what we are legally allowed to do and what legal precedent stands in order for us to do that. If that makes sense.
Oh, no, we understand, you have, yeah, no, we get it.
All right, Bob, item 3, Bob to discuss information from the Intertown Group.
Well, I
I'm gonna
believe
say
Paul
one-
wants.
one
Oh, I'm
thing.
sorry, Paul, I didn't see you.
You address whether that's, the bond issue is more than is necessary. Ask for, whether the town's attorney thinks, given the size of the blast, et cetera, whether we might have a little smaller requirement there.
Yep, I can certainly run that.
A lot of this is produced by the attorney in response to questions, Chairman.
So LD 2003 is a recent law that was passed in May, which has to do with how many houses, and you guys help me out with this, how many houses can be built on a lot. And essentially, the state has now deemed that in 1 year time, within 1 year time, 2 homes or 2 houses, 2 dwellings can be built on what's considered 1 lot.
Yeah.
Help me out, is that essentially it?
That's some of the suggested thing, he probably knows more about the details.
Brandon? Is that
Basically, it's a
pretty close?
it affects all zoning in the state.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it supersedes the towns.
It does, yeah.
Yep.
May or may not, we'll see
Yep.
what happens.
So Paul and I,
I'm sure it'll be tested.
Paul and I went to a meeting, a month or so ago now, with a group of towns who were talking about what are the impacts of different ordinances in different towns. And the ordinances they're talking about are lots of things, but the one that's predominantly on people's mind right now is this new law that just came through. There was a lot of discussion at the last session, which was around short-term rentals. Short-term rentals, of course, are seen to eat up a lot of the homes and apartments and the likes where people who are a little more underprivileged would rent and use, and are now being rented out at much higher rates. So that's some of the concern in all that. And many of the towns are saying that, because we're a vacation area, all of the space we have is getting, all of a sudden allocated to short-term rentals. So that's kind of what's going on within the.
They want affordable housing to come in.
Yeah, so the purpose of the whole thing is more affordable housing for people. And of course, the state has been really pushing the other direction right now in terms of what's really happening because of all these short-term rentals. So I think over time, there's a year before this law actually takes place, becomes official for towns to develop some new ordinances regarding lots and numbers of houses and making it possible for this change to take place. So that's what's happening with that.
Okay.
And
Is that relative to section 8?
pardon me?
Would that be relative to section 8 or section 3? Do you know?
Not sure at this point.
Okay.
Not sure at this point.
So I guess we'll just wait to hear back from Mr. Murphy. I'll get something out to everybody on his advice and what we should do. And then we can discuss revising this at the next meeting.
Regarding the bond, you're gonna talk to him about that, or?
Yeah, I got it written
email?
down.
If not reducing the bond, then just making the responsibility on the landowner rather than one of their subcontractors.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's, well, that was our intent anyway,
Right.
so.
I can actually call some insurance companies and say, hey, I'm gonna do some blasting, I wanna get a bond. How much would it cost? How hard is it to get it? I have no idea. Do you guys have any idea what it would entail to get one?
I haven't dabbled in that.
Gary, would it be fair to, for the amount that's required for the bond to be adjusted according to, they only do it twice a year, and they're smaller, much smaller, so would it have to do with that? how much
I
the
think the
bond
bond,
would
if
be?
there is gonna be a bond, it could be a smaller amount for commercial and a larger amount for
Okay,
industrial,
okay,
which would go right with
right,
the performance standards that have to be met depending on industrial or commercial.
okay.
So probably,
So it would
Which
be
would have,
adjusted.
which would have different peak velocity maximums.
Based on population density
Right,
within a half mile too.
right, because if you have more houses, then you have more, possible damage.
oh, my battery's dead, I'll have to wait.
In your car?
What's everybody's, schedules look like for July meeting? If we keep it on a Thursday, it's 7, 14, and 21.
Can't do 21.
Okay. Tuesday's not good for Dave, right?
There's an appeal on the 14th
Okay,
at 6 p.m.
7th is running too short. What nights do you
The
meet?
21st, there's an
21st.
appeal.
The 21st is
Forum
the-
sitting.
Right.
14th and the 21st?
Correct.
What about on a Wednesday night? Is that possible for you, Dave?
Yeah, yes, very.
Like,
I don't know, probably not the, what is it, the 13th, I'm probably not available.
So the
20th? 20th?
20th, next week, at 6.
Yep. Okay.
20th works for me.
Oh,
It's a Wednesday.
So it'll be 7:20 at 7 PM.
not the 20th, pardon me. I'm
What's-
sorry.
What's that?
I made a mistake. No, can't do the 20th, sorry.
Can't do the 20th,
Right, correct.
27
27 works.
okay?
or 28, there's nothing OP in that.
27th is better for me.
27th at 6,
7 o'clock.
7. One of the appeals is 14th at 6.
Grove needs a compass, he doesn't know where he's gonna be.
That's all right, we'll call and remind him on the day before. All right,
So Barry, do you wanna wait that long, or should we try and do something sooner?
well, I think it might take Tim a week or two to get to the MMA and get back to us, so,
What time did we say?
7 o'clock. All right, we'll go back to anybody in the public for any additional comments before we adjourn the meeting.
I wanna thank you all,
Yes, thank you all for being here.
everybody's volunteer,
Everybody's
hard to
opinion
get
is valued.
volunteers.
Can I have a motion to adjourn until the 27th at 7 PM?
So be it.
In a second?
Second.
All in favor? Thank you.
Oh, okay.